left in the cursed lands to be eaten. The alpha triplets found her barely breathing. The wind tore through the cursed lands like a living thing, carrying with it the scent of decay and the whispers of long-dead spirits. Trees bent beneath the storm, their twisted branches scratching at the gray sky, and jagged rocks jutted out from the earth like the teeth of some ancient beast. In the midst of this desolation, a lone figure stumbled along a narrow path, her cloak shredded and soaked with rain. Ilara's legs ached, her lungs burned, and every step felt heavier than the last. She had been running for hours, or perhaps days. She could no longer tell. The villagers had left her here, condemned to die for a curse they blamed her for. Their fearful whispers had followed her even into the forest. She brings ruin. She is the shadow of our end. Her magic, faint and flickering like a dying flame, stirred uneasily within her. She had always felt different, always known that the strange gifts she carried were dangerous. But she had never intended harm. The villagers would never understand. A shriek of wind tore through the branches above, and she collapsed to her knees, shivering uncontrollably, her vision blurred. She tried to rise again, but her strength was gone. The last thing she heard before darkness crept in was a low growl, deep and resonant, echoing through the valley. Then, as if the world itself had shifted, silence fell. Ilara opened her eyes slowly, the pain in her body screaming at her to move. But she could not. Shadows gathered around her, thick and writhing, and she felt the weight of something ancient watching. Fear clawed at her chest, but even in her terror she sensed a presence far stronger than the creatures of the cursed lands. A force commanding and undeniable. 3 figures emerged from the mist, tall, dark, and impossibly strong. They moved with a grace that seemed both natural and otherworldly. Their eyes glinted with an intensity that made her heart pound, though she could not look away. She felt exposed yet strangely safe in their presence. The first moved forward, his expression unreadable, a mixture of calculation and quiet power. The second's gaze burned with fierce protectiveness, as though he wanted to shield her from every danger in the world. The third was enigmatic, a teasing glimmer in his eyes, yet it held a depth she could not comprehend. Ilara tried to speak, but her voice was little more than a whisper. Who are you?" The eldest stepped closer, his shadow falling across her trembling form. "You should not have been left here," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying authority that made the very air vibrate. "You should have died. Yet here you are." Before she could reply, the ground trembled beneath a growl, and a dark figure lunged from the trees. Its eyes glowed like embers, and teeth sharper than daggers gleamed as it advanced. Ilara froze, too weak to move, but the 3 men reacted in perfect unison. The second brother threw himself in front of her, a barrier of raw power, and the predator recoiled as if struck by an invisible force. The first brother's hand traced a slow, precise motion in the air, and shadows leapt from the ground, forming a protective wall around them. The third's laugh was quiet, almost playful, but it carried authority. He pointed, and the creature froze, staring at him as though he commanded it. The attack was over almost as quickly as it began. The predator vanished into the mist, defeated without a single visible wound. Ilara's body trembled, and tears of relief slid down her cheeks. "You saved me," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. The eldest knelt beside her. "We did not save you because we wanted to. We did it because you are part of something far greater than you know. You are tied to the land itself." His gaze softened, though only slightly, enough for her to feel a flicker of warmth. The second glanced at her, eyes sharp with concern. "You are weaker than you should be. We must take you to safety."
Safety? Ilara tried to rise but collapsed back onto the wet ground.
I am cursed. I will bring death to anyone who helps me." The third smiled faintly, enigmatic and unsettling. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you will bring something no one else can."
They lifted her together, moving with a strength that made her feel like a feather.
The wind howled around them, but not a single branch grazed their path. They carried her through the jagged cliffs, across the cursed valley, until the glow of their fortress appeared on the horizon. A massive structure carved into the mountainside, walls black as obsidian and crowned with jagged spires. The fortress seemed alive, breathing and pulsing with dark magic, yet strangely welcoming. They laid her on a bed of furs near a fire that burned with cold blue flames. She shivered violently, unable to speak, unable to believe she was safe. Kael, the eldest, examined her wounds with precise hands. "You are close to death. Your magic has nearly consumed you." Dorian, the protective one, paced the room, fists clenched. "We should have found you sooner. We cannot afford to lose you, not now." Silas, the youngest, leaned casually against the wall, though his eyes never left her. "And yet here you are," he murmured, alive, breathing, and defying every expectation. Elara tried to understand their words, their presence, their power. Something about them drew her in, though she feared the pull. Her heart raced, both with fear and an unexplainable longing she did not yet recognize. "You will need rest," Kael said, his voice softening slightly. "The storm is not over, and the lands themselves are restless. Stay here, or you will not survive." She nodded weakly, exhaustion finally overtaking her fear. As she drifted into a fitful sleep, the fortress hummed around her, and the wind outside carried whispers, words she almost understood, promises of power, danger, and destiny. In the night, shadows shifted unnaturally, moving closer to the fortress walls. Elara stirred in her sleep, sensing something through the haze of dreams. Her magic flickered again, unbidden, and a chill passed through her. Suddenly a low rumble echoed through the fortress. The fire flickered and dimmed, and the shadows seemed to stretch toward her. A voice, ancient and cold, whispered through the hallways, calling her name. "Elara!" She bolted upright, eyes wide and heart hammering. The brothers were already awake, alert, and their expressions were tense. Call's hand rested on the hilt of a dagger. Dorian's muscles tensed like coiled steel, and Silas's gaze was fixed, unblinking, on the direction of the sound. "What is it?" Elara asked, fear lacing her voice. "A warning," Kael said quietly. "Something old stirs in the cursed lands. It has sensed your presence, and it is not pleased." The wind howled louder, carrying with it an unnatural chill. The shadows outside the fortress seemed to writhe and pulse, forming shapes that should not exist in the natural world. Elara felt her magic awaken again, stronger and wilder than before. Dorian's voice was sharp. "You must control it. If it escapes, it could destroy everything."
I can't, Elara cried, panic rising. "I don't know how." "You will," Silas said, calm but unwavering.
"Or you will not survive. The choice is yours." The whispers grew louder, echoing off the stone walls of the fortress. The shadows pressed closer, curling around the spires like living smoke. The brothers moved instinctively, forming a protective circle around her. But even their power was not enough to stop the growing darkness. Elara's heart pounded as she realized the truth. She was not merely a victim of the cursed lands. She was a part of them. Her magic, her curse, and her destiny were intertwined with the shadows and storms around her. And if she failed to control it, the very world she had barely survived could crumble. Her fear burned into determination. She would survive. She had to. But as the shadows pressed against the fortress walls, as the wind screamed through the mountains, and as her brothers prepared to defend her with every ounce of their strength, she could not shake the creeping sense of dread. The curse was awakening, and it hungered for more than just her. The fortress gates shuddered under the force of something unseen. A figure, cloaked in darkness, appeared at the edge of the clearing outside, and the storm seemed to part for it. Its eyes glowed with an ancient malice, fixed on the vulnerable girl who had been left to die in the cursed lands. Elara's breath caught in her throat as she realized she was not safe. Not yet. Not while the curse still lived. And in that moment, the Alpha Triplets knew that their arrival in the cursed lands had changed everything. and that the night ahead would demand everything they had to protect the girl barely clinging to life. The storm raged on, lightning splitting the sky, and the shadows whispered a single chilling truth. She is not yours yet, and she may never be. Elara awoke to the soft crackle of the cold blue flames in the fortress hearth. The room smelled of wet furs and faint incense. Her body ached in every place she could feel, but it was alive, whole enough to move, and that was more than she had expected when the Alpha Triplets had found her in the cursed lands. She blinked at the three figures surrounding her bed. Kale, tall and commanding, knelt beside her, studying her closely, his dark eyes sharp but soft with concern. Dorian paced near the window, shoulders tense as though the wind outside threatened to tear the entire fortress apart. Silas leaned casually against the wall, his gaze distant, yet fixed on her in a way that made her skin prickle with unease and curiosity all at once. "You're awake," Kale said quietly, his voice steady like stone against the storm. "You should rest, but you need to understand your situation." Elara tried to sit up, but her limbs refused to obey. She winced, and Kael gently pressed his hand to her shoulder. "Don't strain yourself," he said. "You have survived much, yet there is more ahead." Dorian stopped pacing and turned to her. His expression was sharp, urgent. "We cannot stay here idle. The cursed land sense your presence. Whatever caused your near death is not gone. It watches." Elara's throat tightened. "I don't understand. Why? Why me? Why did they leave me to die?" Her voice shook, and the words came out in a whisper. Silas's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. "Because fear is an easy way to control people," he said softly. "They did not see you for what you are. They saw only what they feared. But we—" He paused, his gaze locking on hers. "We see something else entirely." Kael's jaw tightened. "You carry power, Elara. Power that is dangerous and rare. It is tied to this land and its old curse. It will take time for you to understand it, and it will take courage for you to control it." Elara swallowed hard. Her magic, she had always hidden it, always been afraid of it. But in that moment, in the fortress of the Alpha Triplets, she realized it was waking, whispering inside her like a storm trapped beneath skin.
She shivered. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, voice barely audible.
"I am cursed. I will bring ruin to anyone who touches me." Dorian stepped closer, his voice firm and unwavering. "Because your fate is tied to ours. We cannot allow the cursed lands to claim you. If you fall, it will not only be you who suffers. There is more at stake, more than you can see yet." Kale looked at her with an intensity that made her stomach twist. "It is not a choice, Elara. Survival demands action. You must trust us, even if only for now." She wanted to argue, to run, to hide, yet exhaustion held her down. Even as she feared the bond she felt forming with these three strangers, she also recognized something deep and undeniable. She had nowhere else to go. For the next hours, she drifted between sleep and waking. The triplets watched over her, their presence protective and imposing. Every so often, Kale would check her injuries with precision and care. Dorian would mutter warnings about the land beyond the fortress walls, and Silas would occasionally whisper half-mocking questions to test her resolve. By the time dawn broke, painting the cursed mountains in pale silver, Elara felt the first stirring of hope she had known in weeks. Yet even in that fragile optimism, fear remained. The cursed lands had not forgotten her. Kale finally broke the silence, his voice deliberate. "You must learn to use your gift. The curse in these lands is old and powerful. It recognizes you, and soon it may test you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Elara looked up at him, shivering. "Test me. How?"
"I barely survived the forest."
"You survived because of us," Dorian said sharply. "But survival alone is not enough. The curse will come for you again, stronger. You must be ready." Silas tilted his head, his gaze piercing. "Do you even know what you are, Elara? Or do you still believe yourself a simple girl left to die?" Elara swallowed, sensing the truth in his words. She had always known there was more inside her, something beyond fear and pain, but she had been too afraid to look, too afraid to admit that perhaps she was stronger than she realized. Kale stood and approached the tall windows, looking out at the storm-laden peaks. This fortress has stood for centuries, guarding the cursed lands and those who dwell near them. But nothing lasts forever. And now, the curse knows you exist. Elara's heart skipped. It knows me? Yes, Kale said softly. And it will test us all? The room fell silent. The only sound, the flicker of the strange blue flames in the hearth. The wind outside howled against the fortress walls as though echoing the words Kale had spoken. Dorian moved closer, his hands brushing against the edge of the bed as he knelt beside her. You will need guidance, he said, voice low. We will teach you, but you must listen. Obey when needed, and trust us. Can you do that? Elara hesitated, staring at the three faces around her. There was power in them, certainty, and strength that made her feel small and fragile. Yet beneath that power there was care, unexpected and disarming. I will try, she whispered. Kale nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then turned to the others. Prepare her, he said. We will begin soon. Over the next days, the fortress became her world. She learned its halls, its hidden chambers, and its strange pulse of magic. The triplets trained her in small ways at first, controlling her breathing, focusing her senses, and feeling the flow of power through her body. Even the simplest tasks were exhausting, yet she found herself growing stronger, more aware and more attuned to the land around her. At night, she often lay awake, listening to the wind howl over the cursed mountains. Shadows shifted beyond the windows, and sometimes she thought she saw shapes that were not entirely human. The triplets always stayed near, their presence both comforting and unnerving. Kale was the stern teacher, guiding her with patience and sharp precision. Dorian was the protector, watching her every move, occasionally scolding her for taking unnecessary risks. Silas was the one who pushed her, teasing and provoking her into using her magic, forcing her to face her fears in small, controlled bursts. Despite their differences, their unity was unshakable. Together they created a circle of safety, one she clung to even as her heart began to recognize the pull she felt toward them. The pull was dangerous, and she knew it. Yet it could not be ignored. One evening, as the wind screamed outside and the fortress trembled under the force of a brewing storm, Elara's magic surged unexpectedly. Blue sparks danced along her fingertips, illuminating the room in a soft, eerie glow. The triplets reacted instantly. Control it! Kale commanded, his hand hovering over hers, steadying the energy. I'm trying, she cried, panic rising. Dorian's voice was calm but firm. Breathe, Elara. Do not fight it. Flow with it. Silas's eyes glinted with something unreadable. You are ready for more than you think. Let it guide you. The magic obeyed, settling into a steady pulse under her control. But as it calmed, a low, sinister voice echoed in the fortress halls, carried by the wind. It was ancient and cold, a whisper she felt more than heard. You cannot hide forever. The curse will claim you. The room went silent. Even the flames seemed to flicker in fear. Kale's expression darkened. It knows you are here, he said quietly, and it will not wait. Dorian's fists clenched. Then we prepare. We will face it together. No harm will come to you, not while we stand. Silas, leaning against the wall, let out a low whistle. And yet, the storm has only begun. Elara's pulse raced. She felt both fear and a strange thrill, knowing that her survival depended not only on her growing power but also on the strength, guidance, and devotion of these three brothers. She was no longer a helpless girl in the cursed lands. She was a force awakening, and she would need every ounce of courage to face what was coming. As the wind screamed through the mountains, the fortress walls shuddered, and the shadows pressed closer. A single truth became clear to her. The journey of survival, power, and destiny had only just begun. And somewhere beyond the fortress walls, in the twisting mists of the cursed lands, something waited, watching, patient, and hungry. The Alpha Triplets knew the night ahead would demand everything they had to protect her, and Alara knew that soon she would have to face the darkness not as a victim, but as someone capable of fighting back or being consumed. The cursed lands beyond the fortress stretched like a living shadow, a world of misty valleys and twisted trees that whispered warnings to all who dared enter. Inside the fortress, Alara trained under the watchful eyes of the Alpha Triplets. Her body had begun to heal, but her heart still bore the weight of fear, betrayal, and a strange longing she could not name. Kale, Dorian, and Silas had taught her to focus her energy, to listen to the currents of magic flowing through her body, and to connect to the land itself. But the more she learned, the more she realized how little she understood. The curse that had nearly claimed her life was not a simple darkness. It was alive, shifting, and hungry. One evening, the storm outside was fierce, and the wind howled like an animal in pain. Alara stood in the central hall, her fingers glowing faintly with blue energy. Kale observed her closely, silent and calculating. "Focus, Alara," he instructed. "Do not allow fear to control you. The land responds to your mind, your heart, your will. You must be steady." Alara's hands trembled and a small surge of magic shot toward the ceiling, crackling like lightning. She bit her lip, frustrated. I can't keep it steady. It moves on its own." Dorian stepped beside her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "Do not fight it," he said gently but with authority. "Flow with it. Let it become a part of you, not a weapon against you." Silas, leaning against the wall, watched her with a half-smile. "You are stronger than you think, Alara. Stronger than you admit. Fear is the only thing holding you back." Alara closed her eyes, drawing in a deep, trembling breath. She could feel the pulse of the land through her feet, through her hands, through her heart. It was wild, unpredictable, and terrifying, but it was hers. Slowly, painfully, she learned to guide it. The glow in her fingers steadied, brighter now, warm and alive instead of sparking and chaotic. Kale's eyes softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Better," he said. "You are learning. Soon, you will understand how to protect yourself and others." Dorian's gaze was intense, almost possessive. "And you will not be alone," he added quietly. "We will always stand with you." Silas pushed off the wall, walking closer. "But remember this, Alara. Even with us, the curse will test you. There are things in these lands older than any fortress, older than any king, older than all of us. And it is waiting for you." Alara shivered, knowing he spoke the truth. The cursed lands were alive, and they had sensed her. Shadows moved in ways that were impossible. Whispers reached into her mind, and in the quiet moments she felt eyes watching her from places she could not see. Days passed, each one a trial of strength, patience, and self-discovery. She grew stronger, her magic more responsive, yet she also began to see the shadows in the triplets themselves. Kale was rigid and unyielding, his control over the fortress and its people absolute, yet she glimpsed a loneliness beneath his stern exterior. Dorian was fierce and protective, his heart open and raw, yet she sensed his fear of losing her, fear of failing. Silas, ever enigmatic, teased her endlessly. But even in his playfulness, there was a weight in his eyes, a depth she could not fathom. One night as the moon cast silver light across the fortress walls, Alara stood on the balcony overlooking the cursed valley. The wind tugged at her hair and the distant peaks glowed faintly under the storm clouds. She could feel the pulse of the land more clearly than ever, and with it, a whisper of a truth she was not ready to hear. "You are part of this land," Kale said from behind her, his voice quiet. "Not just a visitor, not just a survivor. You belong here, and the curse will not rest until it understands you." Alara turned to him, her eyes wide. "Belong here? I don't even understand what I am yet." "You will," he said simply, "if you are brave enough to face it." Dorian joined them on the balcony, his expression grave. "The shadows will come," he warned. "They are drawn to your power, and they will test all of us, your strength, our strength, and the bond between us. Silas appeared from the darkness, leaning against the railing with that same enigmatic smile. And it is in those tests that you will discover what you are capable of, Ilara. Don't fear it. Embrace it. The wind swirled around them, carrying whispers from the cursed lands below. Ilara's heart raced, half in fear, half in anticipation. She knew the triplets were right. She could not hide from her magic, from the curse, or from the truth of who she was. The following days were filled with training, exploration, and cautious experimentation with her powers. She learned to shape shadows, to call winds, and even to sense the movements of creatures lurking in the cursed lands. But each victory came with a cost. The curse responded, sending storms, illusions, and creatures to challenge her and test her limits. One evening, during a particularly violent storm, Ilara found herself alone in the training hall. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the dark room in blinding bursts. She concentrated, feeling the surge of magic within her, trying to steady it, trying to control it. Suddenly, the shadows around her thickened, coiling like serpents. A cold, whispering voice filled the room, echoing off the walls. "You cannot hide, child of power. The curse hungers for what is yours." Ilara's hands glowed and she pushed back instinctively, sending the shadows scattering. But more came, faster, pressing closer, feeding on her fear. She stumbled backward, chest heaving, as the shadows seemed to reach for her. "Focus!" Kale's voice cut through the chaos. He appeared at the doorway, his presence commanding. "Do not let them consume you. Control them, or they will control you." Dorian followed, moving with the precision of a warrior, his eyes blazing with protective fury. "We will not let them take you." Silas arrived last, calm yet dangerous, his voice low. "Remember what you are, Ilara. The curse fears you as much as you fear it. Do not give it power over your heart." Ilara took a deep breath, drawing the energy inward. She felt the pulse of her magic, her connection to the land, and with one steady movement, she shaped the shadows into harmless tendrils that dissipated into the air. The room stilled, and the storm outside seemed to pause, as though acknowledging her triumph. The triplets surrounded her, each showing a different emotion: pride, relief, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. "You are stronger than you realize," Kale said quietly. "You are ready for more than just survival," Dorian added. "And yet," Silas whispered, a hint of mischief in his voice, "the darkness still watches. It will not forget your name." Ilara's heart pounded. She had won this battle, but she knew the war was far from over. She also felt something else stirring inside her. A bond with the triplets. Complicated, confusing, and yet undeniable. Each of them drew something from her heart. A different strength, a different comfort, a different challenge. But even as she acknowledged this bond, the shadows at the edges of the cursed land shifted, unseen yet palpable. Somewhere out there, a force older than the mountains, hungrier than the wind, had taken notice. That night, as Ilara lay on her bed, the storm raging outside, she felt it, a whisper of destiny, cold and thrilling. "You cannot run, child of the cursed lands, and you cannot hide. Soon, all will be revealed, and all will be tested." Ilara's eyes snapped open, heart racing. She sensed the power moving through her, stronger than ever, and she realized the truth. The curse was awakening fully now, drawn to her strength, her courage, and the bond she had formed with the Alpha triplets. She rose from her bed, stepping to the balcony despite the storm, looking out at the cursed lands that stretched endlessly before her. The wind lashed at her, but she did not flinch. She was not the same girl who had stumbled, wounded and alone, into these mountains. She was something more, a force tied to the land, a spark of magic, a heart learning to face fear with courage. And yet, even as determination filled her, a shadow darker than the storm fell across the valley. Shapes moved that should not exist. Whispers curled like smoke around the fortress walls. Something waited, patient, hungry, watching. Elara turned to the triplets, each standing near her, their faces serious but unwavering. She knew they would protect her, guide her, and challenge her. But she also knew the final test would be hers alone. The wind screamed, the lightning flashed, and the cursed lands itself seemed to shiver in anticipation. The prophecy whispered in her mind, words she had only glimpsed before. When the child of the cursed lands rises, the shadows will come, hearts will break, power will ignite, and all will be tested. Alara's fingers glowed faintly. She inhaled sharply, feeling her heart beat in rhythm with the land. She was ready to face the darkness, but she knew one truth above all. The shadows beyond the walls were only the beginning. And somewhere, in the storm-racked valley below, a force older than time waited, ready to challenge her in ways she could not yet imagine. The night stretched on, filled with whispers, wind, and watchful eyes. And in the darkness the Alpha Triplets knew the hardest trials of heart, loyalty and courage were still to come, and that the bond forming between them and the girl barely rescued from death would be tested like never before. The cursed lands waited. The night was alive with storm and shadow. Lightning split the sky, revealing jagged peaks and twisted forest of the cursed lands, and the wind carried whispers of anger, hunger, and ancient magic. The fortress trembled under the force of the storm, yet inside, Elara stood with the Alpha Triplets, her hands glowing with steady blue light. Kale, tall and commanding, had taken his place at her side, his expression tense but focused. Dorian's fierce gaze swept the room, muscles coiled and ready to protect. Silas, ever enigmatic, smiled faintly, a glimmer of calm in the chaos. Together, they formed a circle around Elara, guardians of a girl who had once been left to die. "The curse has come for you," Kale said quietly, his voice a calm anchor against the roaring wind outside. "We knew it would. It will test your strength, your courage, and your heart. Are you ready?" Elara swallowed hard. Her chest ached with fear, but also determination. I have to be," she whispered. "I can't run anymore. Not now." Dorian stepped closer, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "We will not let it harm you," he said. "But you must face it yourself. Only you can control the power it seeks to claim." Silas's eyes glimmered in the dim light. "And remember, the curse fears what you are becoming. It is drawn to weakness, not courage." Outside, the fortress gates shuddered violently. Shadows, darker than night itself, pressed against the walls, moving unnaturally. Whispers filled the air, curling around the spires and into the rooms. The storm intensified, as if the heavens themselves were testing them. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of magic within her. She could hear the heartbeat of the land, the rhythm of wind and stone, and the tremor of the curse that sought to consume her. She drew a deep, steadying breath, letting the energy flow through her. The blue light in her hands grew stronger, steadying and warm. A shape began to form in the shadows outside, a figure taller than any man, cloaked in darkness, with eyes glowing like molten silver. Its presence radiated hunger and ancient malice. The fortress seemed to shrink under its gaze, walls quivering as though afraid. "Stay behind me," Kale instructed, placing himself in front of Elara. Dorian moved to flank her, and Silas circled the space, eyes sharp. Elara stepped forward, hands glowing, feeling the power within her respond to the threat. "I am not afraid," she said, her voice firm, even as her heart raced. "I will not be controlled. Not by you. Not by the curse. Not by anyone." The dark figure paused, its head tilting slightly as if considering her words. Then it surged forward, moving faster than sight could follow. Shadows spilled over the ground like ink, reaching toward her with clawed, twisting forms. Kale and Dorian struck first, their combined power pushing back the shadows. Silas moved beside Elara, guiding her, his voice low and steady. "Focus, Elara. Let the land fight with you. Shape the shadows, do not let them shape you." Elara closed her eyes, letting herself become one with the fortress, the mountains, and even the storm. The blue light in her hands grew brighter, expanding outward, and for a moment, The shadows recoiled. She could feel the darkness testing her, trying to find fear, doubt, and hesitation, but she refused to give it any. With a cry, she released the energy, sending a wave of magic that twisted the shadows back into nothingness. The dark figure roared, a sound that shook the walls and rattled the stones beneath their feet. Yet even in its rage, it hesitated. Alara realized she had not only defended herself, she had called the curse's power into question. Kale's eyes softened as he watched her. "You are stronger than I imagined," he said quietly, almost in awe. Dorian's expression held pride, tempered with relief. "And you are not alone," he reminded her. "We are with you." Silas stepped closer, his hand brushing hers for the briefest moment. "And together we can face anything." The dark figure surged again, more forceful this time. The fortress walls shook under its power, and the storm outside became a whirlwind of lightning and wind. Alara felt her energy waning, her magic straining, but she refused to stop. She had come too far, survived too much, and discovered too much within herself to falter now. She remembered Kale's words, "You must trust yourself." She remembered Dorian's, "We will not let you fall." She remembered Silas's, "The darkness fears courage." With that, she took a deep breath, and her magic surged, brighter and stronger than ever before. The shadow screamed, twisting violently, then scattered into nothing. The dark figure, unable to withstand her power, recoiled, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You cannot defeat me," it hissed, voice like cracking ice. "I am not trying to defeat you," Alara said, voice steady and calm. "I am controlling you. I am stronger than fear. I am the heart of this land." The figure shuddered, then slowly dissipated, leaving nothing but echoes and a cold silence. The storm outside began to ease, the wind dying down, and the cursed land seemed to exhale as if releasing a long-held breath. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. The triplets immediately closed around her, each showing a different emotion: pride, relief, and something deeper, unspoken, that made her heart race. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You have done what few could," he said softly. "You faced the curse, and you prevailed. Not through strength alone, but through courage and will." Dorian crouched near her, his eyes fierce yet tender. "And you have reminded us of what it means to fight for something precious. You are not just strong, Alara. You are a force of life in these cursed lands." Silas, leaning closer, his gaze warm, said, "And you have shown us that even in darkness, hearts can shine. Together, we are unstoppable." Alara felt tears prick her eyes, not from fear, but from relief, gratitude, and something unnameable that had grown between them. She had been abandoned, left to die, yet now she was alive, stronger, and connected to these three brothers in a bond that transcended fear, power, and even destiny. Over the following days, the fortress returned to its quiet strength. The storm subsided, the cursed land seemed calmer, and Elara's magic settled into a rhythm that was part of her, not something wild and uncontrollable. The triplets continued to train her, but now with a new understanding. She was no longer a frightened girl. They were partners, equals in courage and strength. Kale's demeanor softened. He allowed himself moments of quiet connection, watching her not as a pupil but as someone who had faced darkness and survived. Dorian became less overprotective, learning to trust her instincts, while Silas remained enigmatic but respectful, offering guidance without testing her unnecessarily. Alara, in turn, learned to trust them fully, not just as teachers, protectors, or saviors, but as companions who had become part of her heart. The bond between them was unspoken, a mixture of loyalty, respect, and an unbreakable connection forged in danger and triumph. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the cursed lands in gold and violet, Alara stood on the balcony looking out at the mountains and forests below. The air was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time she felt truly free. Kale joined her silently, Dorian and Silas soon following. Together, they stood in the fading light, watching the world that had once seemed so cruel and hopeless. The curse is gone, Kale said softly. At least for now. But remember this, Alara. You are a part of these lands. And one day the balance may be tested again.
Alara nodded, understanding the weight of his words. I will be ready, she said.
And I will not face it alone. Dorian placed a hand on her back, firm and reassuring. We will face it together. Always. Silas's smile was gentle, almost shy for once. And we will not let anything take what we have found. The courage, the heart, and the bond we share. The wind carried their words into the twilight, and the cursed lands seemed to shimmer in response, a silent acknowledgement of the triumph of courage, trust, and unity. Ilara felt the pulse of her magic once more, steady, warm, and entirely under her control. She was no longer a victim, no longer alone, and no longer defined by fear or the curse. She was alive, powerful, and bound to the triplets in a connection that promised strength, hope, and a future they would face together. And in the quiet of the fortress, under the soft glow of the last blue flames, the girl who had been left to die in the cursed lands finally smiled. She was home. But even as peace settled, a single thought lingered in her mind. The cursed lands would never truly sleep, and one day the test would come again. Yet now, she was ready, and she would not face it alone.